When I was in federal prison, the one thing I craved was to listen and learn from leaders. Today, I try to solve that problem for other people in prison who want to position themselves for success. What's our strategy? Well, our strategy is the same lesson that we learned from Mahatma Gandhi, who tells us to strive to be the change that we want to see in the world. And what I want to see in the world are more people coming out of prison successfully. That's why I spend time reaching out to business leaders like my good friend Satish. Now, I should say Satish is a successful business guy. I'm going to just ask him some broad questions in the beginning so that you can get an idea of how successful he is. And then we're going to backtrack and reverse engineer how he got there. So Satish, thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to participate with us. Let me start off with a quick question just to let the people know. What is the annual revenues best year for the company you lead?
We were over 30 million at our peak.
So I ask that because I want you to recognize this is somebody who doesn't only talk about becoming successful. He's somebody that built a company that sold $30 million worth of products a year. And that's somebody I know I would have liked to have learned from, and I'm hopeful that you're going to like to learn from as well. So Satish, again, you lead a big company. How many people work in your firm?
So, we started at 15 years ago, maybe 12 people. Today, we're well over 100.
So more than 100 people working there. How many jobs would you say that you have created over the course of your career?
Oh, well into the hundreds.
Well into the hundreds, because some people come and there's transitions and so on. Some people come, but at a given time, you always have 100 people on the payroll.
Yep.
And that makes you, in my eyes, a qualified expert in helping people understand what does it really take to position yourself for the employment market. And what I would love your help in doing is teaching people in jail and prison what they should be doing while they're inside. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to ask you about your background and kind of pick it apart and show what I would have liked to have learned from you while I was going through that journey myself. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Great. So why don't you tell us about where you grew up and what your aspirations were when you were growing up?
Sure. So I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Buena Park, California. I was just a kid growing up. It was a time where, it was a pretty diverse community, a lot of different cultures, different backgrounds. My parents came from India and had me here. So I was born and raised in Southern California. I followed the lead from my parents, who really were big into education and really wanted me to push myself to achieve something. So I always challenged myself. That was rule number one, is constantly challenging yourself to get better. Right. So when I was really young, one of the things that I started to do was I started to play with the chemistry set that I got for Christmas. And that started getting me into science. It started getting me into chemistry. It started getting me into just how things work and how things react. And it just opened my mind up a lot. And that was kind of...
you'd said chemistry, and you'd said that your father came from India. What was your father's background?
So my father was a pharmacist. He went to pharmacy school in India, came to America, pursued his pharmacy career out here.
And you wanted to follow in his footsteps, I take it. But a lot of the people who are in prison right now, they don't have those backgrounds, right? They don't always come from a background where there are great role models around them and people who are teaching them and inspiring them to develop a profession. They are people who really live and struggle a lot of times. And a lot of them struggle with institutional racism and lack of opportunities. Tell us about what thoughts you have as an immigrant or as the son of an immigrant in the United States, if you ever encountered anything like that and how you coped and dealt with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up an Indian kid in Buena Park, and at that time there was a lot of racism around. Every group was kind of segregated, and I was seen as kind of the outsider. So I faced a lot of people that judged me just based on the color of my skin, or just where my parents came from, or what my ethnic background was. And it's a challenging thing to deal with. But what I learned is you need to use it to fuel yourself, to challenge yourself to become even better. So when people start looking at you, they're not just looking at the color of your skin or, your last name or your background. They're looking at you for the contents of your mind and what you can do, what you can get out there and accomplish, or what you have accomplished. So that's it. I learned to use and take something that was negative and flip it and turn it into a positive.
And so what was the pathway to turn something negative into a positive? Was it developing athletics? Was it developing your mind? Was it developing a specific talent? What worked for you?
Yeah, so I found my strengths were in math and science, and like I was saying, I had a chemistry set, and it's something that I enjoyed. But I took a lot of the frustration that I had, just dealing with people and racism, and just kind of being neglected and left out, and I put that into my education. And I focused really where I was strong at. I knew my strong points. I knew my weak points. The weak points, I let them kind of be, but I focused on my strengths, right? So for me, it was at that time, it was focusing on education, focusing on chemistry, focusing on math, and focusing on sciences and backgrounds of science and learning. I just constantly challenged myself and wanted to apply more and more.
Did you always know what you wanted to do? I mean, you said that you became attracted to chemistry as a very young person. Did you always know that you wanted to pursue a career in science?
Yeah, so initially I didn't. I mean, even the thoughts of career wasn't really across my mind, but it wasn't until I met with my junior high counselor. And it was my counselor that told me, hey, you're good in math, you're good at science. These are things that you enjoy doing. Why don't you look at a career in pharmacy? And I thought about it and I agreed with him. And that's actually what drove me to my educational path and, my career where I ended up.
So what was the path that you took? You said that you did well in school, you earned good grades, you studied in a discipline that you thought you might want to pursue a career in. What was the next step besides earning grades? What did you do to advance your career?
Yeah, so I stayed focused on that path, right? I thought about how do I get to pharmacy? So if you know what your goal is and you're defining it, you can take that and work backwards from there. Right. And I knew if I wanted to become a pharmacist, I had to get good grades. I had to especially do well in math and science. I had to get involved with extracurricular activities. I had to do anything I had to do to impress the people that were reading my college application. So that's where I stayed focused on. So it wasn't just the schooling side. It was making sure that, I showed them that I had strengths in these areas and why I'd be a good candidate to participate in their program.
And what steps did you take to find the right program for you?
So I spent a lot of time researching online, talking to counselors, just talking to people in general. And when I went to a pharmacy and I spoke to the pharmacist, they provided guidance. They say, hey, if you want to become a pharmacist, here's the things that you should be focusing on. This is what you should be doing. And I did exactly that.
And what schools did you identify as being potential or the best candidates for you?
Yeah, so I applied schools on the West Coast, schools on the East Coast. And I was originally born in California, but I wanted to venture out a little bit and try something different. So I ended up choosing a school called Rutgers in New Jersey. And I was fortunate, I got directly into a program. That program was a 6-year program. And basically I went from a kid in Orange County, California, to spending 6 years out in New Jersey, earning my doctorate. And it wasn't easy. It was super challenging. There were a lot of sleepless nights and just a lot of work, but eventually, I got through it and I earned my degree.
And what challenges did you face along the way once you transition as a kid from Orange County to living in a new community? Could you tell us a little about some of the challenges you faced and the strategies you used to overcome them? The reason I ask is that a lot of the people in jail and prison, they're always dealing with challenges. Mm-hmm. And our mission in our course is to help those people understand if they stay focused on pursuing success as they define it, they're a much better position to overcome those challenges. Tell us what worked for you.
Yeah, so it was definitely a different environment. And the one thing I learned is you have to adapt, right? Like there's the old saying, either adapt or die. So I wanted to adapt to the environment. It was a different weather, it was a different attitude, it was different people, but I really focused on adapting to the mentality out there, the mindset, knowing that I had to put my head in the books, I had to focus on school, I had to focus on, learning the cities, the towns, and, it was a different world for someone who was 18. But that's kind of my strategy. It's really focus on learning what's around you and learn how to adapt to it. Don't try to fight it, adapt to it.
You said that it was a 6-year program. Could you tell me if in what ways the program escalated in difficulty or how it became easier as you worked your way through it? How did that 6-year progression work for you?
Yeah, so when I first started, my first year was actually really difficult. High school versus college, it's two different beasts. And especially when you're learning, when you're having to study from books and take these exams, it wasn't the same way it was in high school. So that was part of it. I had to learn a little bit by failing. I failed some initial exams and I didn't do so good initially in the beginning. And I figured out that I need to re-strategize and readapt and change my style. So I started to focus on the way I studied. I started to focus the way I took notes. And I started changing my strategy up so that I can eventually start doing better and better and better. And as the years went, initially what was difficulty for me ended up becoming kind of the standard norm. I knew what I needed to do to get through the courses, get through the classes, get through the exams. So I applied what was working. And I continued to apply that all the way from the point where I figured that out to my graduation.
What was motivating you along the way, Satish? How did you stay disciplined when you're transitioning from an 18-year-old in Orange County to living in an entirely different state on the other coast without family or friends? What kept you motivated throughout that 6-year path or pursuit of a pharmacy degree?
Yeah, it was exactly what you said. It was the pharmacy degree. Getting that degree was what kept me motivated the most. So I knew every single step I took, every single exam I took was one step closer to my end goal. And that was the thing, I knew how I had defined success, which was graduating from Rutgers University, 6 years with my doctorate in pharmacy. And I knew every single thing that I did that would help me get there was one step closer.
And that's an important lesson for anybody in jail or prison, because sometimes we have to go through, or I know that I had to go through 26 years, and I had to have that same level of saying, let me get through this, let me get through this goal, this goal, this goal. And as I achieved one goal, a new opportunity would open. And I've got to expect that's the same thing that happened for you. After you got through the first year, new opportunities open, third year, fourth year. It eventually became part of your second nature for you as you developed true mastery of your profession.
Yeah, every single year was one step closer. So I knew I had 6 years, but every time I finished the semester, every time I finished an exam, I knew I was just getting closer and closer to the finish line.
And how did that transform your life? You graduated with your doctorate degree in pharmacy. You're probably in your early 20s or mid 20s. Tell us about the pathway of your career from there.
Yeah, so I ended up coming back to California. I was 23 at the time. And, I felt like I had this big accomplishment and I was done. But reality was I was just getting started in my career. At that point, I only had my degree and I didn't have anything else. So I started studying for the boards. I was taking board exams. And at that time, my father had a really small company that he had started on his own. And he had asked me to help. There were some changes within the laws and he needed someone that was kind of younger and more aggressive, more energetic to come in and help him just pave the landscape, pave the way.
And what was your role in that, in helping him develop his business?
Yeah, so I was involved in all facets. Really, you talk from engineering to design to layout to sales to, marketing of the company. I didn't know much. I was learning as I went, but everything that I learned, I took it. And just like same with pharmacy school, it was one step closer, one step closer. So everything that I was learning, I used it. I used it to the maximum that I could. And eventually, we took a small company and really put together a sales strategy and really just started focusing on, okay, here's what we need to do to hit our goals. We need to start really getting out there. We need to start selling. We need to start getting new clientele. We need to start bringing in new business because ultimately that's all money. It's all revenue.
So you had a really clear definition of what success is going to look like, and then you engineered that path Can you walk us through? It's one thing to say, I know what I have to do. And
Sure.
then it's another thing to really break it down with some really actionable strategies. Could you tell us about those?
Yeah. So, I mean, I knew if we needed to increase revenue for us to make the changes we needed for within the company, right? We look at a company, it needs cash. And for us to get that cash, the best way to do it is to bring in new business. So my focus was, if we want to bring in new business, I really need to step in and start picking up the phone, and I need to start making sales. I need to make calls, emails, whatever it takes. I have to do whatever it takes to bring the clients in and say, hey, this is me. This is what I do. Come work with us. And it was, it wasn't easy. There's a lot of no's, but for every 99 no's, there might be one yes. And I was just focused on getting that one yes.
Well, getting sales is one thing, but there's another aspect, I would assume, of building a business, and that's in actually building your teams. And I've got to imagine, you said that you just came out of pharmacy school without any experience at all. What challenges did you face in building teams that would help you grow and fulfill the orders for all these people that you brought in?
Yeah, it was a challenge finding the right help for the right role. A lot of it is just learning as you go. So I had to learn. I had to say, okay, I might need somebody that can assist me in whatever it might be, maybe in quality, or maybe in purchasing, or maybe in just documentation. So I had to put out ads, and we had to find people, recruit people, and there's some interviews involved. So it's always good to be practicing at home for your interviews. And a lot of it was just finding and kind of tuning the people and having them coached a little bit to see what we could do to mold them into the right fit. So there was definitely some trial and error involved.
How did the employment roles, I guess you'd call it, the head count of people in your company, how long did it take to go from the time you went there and you said there were 12 people to where it grew to become a substantial employer in your community?
Yeah, it was probably a good 7-8 years before we really crossed the 100 employee mark. And it wasn't easy. It was initially hiring one candidate for a role. And then once that one candidate starts and work, the company starts to grow, you get busier and busier, you start realizing that position that is actually might need some more help. So then you start hiring the next person, and you start dividing up the roles, and then it continues down that path, right? So you start at one place, but when you grow, then you start to bring on additional staff and start to bring on additional help, because there's a role for everybody, right? We can find something for anyone to do.
I read a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it was really telling the story about how a CEO, the evolution and development of a CEO, where you might require one set of skills to get through high school. You might develop another set of skills to successfully graduate through college. But when you move into the workforce, that requires an entirely new set of skills. And then when you start building teams, that's a whole different set of skills. Can you walk us through or help people who are not in the role of hiring other people? What skills do you rely upon to build a team and get everybody marching along in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, one is definitely communication, right? We all want to be able to communicate. We all want to be able to work with one another. So we're looking at people, kind of like what I was saying about going from California to New Jersey, is we look for those that can adapt, right? So can you adapt to the challenges? Can you adapt, and can you learn a little bit more just from what you know to what you should know next, right? And that's the thing about growing a company. You don't really know what's required at the next step. You don't really know until you get there. But once you get there, you need to expand your education. You might need to hire new help and have them help you to take it to the next level.
How about communication skills are important, and of course that would include both writing skills but also verbal skills. So we're communicating orders, but I imagine you did all of your own, or had to start doing all of your own writing and all of your own training. And is that accurate, or how else were you able to do that?
So it originally started myself, but as you go along and you're challenging yourself, you're pushing yourself, you begin to gain additional critical thinking skills, right? And as you're going, you're learning, you're reading, you're writing, you start to go back and you look at your work, because you're evolving as a person. You're evolving your mindset, you're evolving the way you think. And you can go back and look at your previous work from when you first started, and you can actually start to take a look at it and criticize it yourself and say, you know what, I did this, but it could be this much better. And I know it could be better because I've obtained the skills through my experience. And it's really important that, anyone is, if you're reading that, you go back and you reread it, read it again, read it again. Like they say, repetition is the master skill. So you want to be able to read your own work, criticize your own work, and fine tune it, because it's only going to make you better.
But in addition to communicating and making sure that everybody understands the marching orders of what builds excellence in a company, as the leader of the company, you're also going to need to have some facility with numbers as well, and making sure that you could read to make sure that your investments are paying off. Because I've got to imagine, to build a company that's generating $30 million in revenues, your family had to invest quite a bit to build that company as you grew. Tell us a little bit about how your knowledge of accounting or math or finance grew or changed over the years.
Yeah, so, like I said, a lot of it really was trial and error. It started knowing just what I knew at the very basics and very minimums. But I knew one thing, and I knew we had to bring sales, we had to bring customers in, we had to bring cash in. And as customers came and they started placing more orders and started basically spending more money with us, that's when we could start looking at, okay, we know we have this much cash coming in. How do I break that down and spend a portion of it for this thing, a portion of it for this, a portion for the staff, a portion for equipment, whatever it might be. It is really a trial and error. And it's something as you go along, you need to be continuously thinking about it, right? Don't focus on where you're at right now. You need to be thinking 5 steps ahead. Where do I want to get later down the line? How do I get there?
And how you get there is really an important lesson, because when you're starting with a company that has 12 people and you're growing it to 10 times that, you've got to bring in those resources. What is the secret that worked for you, or the pathway or the process that worked for you to go out and attract these new customers that will place orders with your company?
No, it's a great question, because for me, what I learned was I needed to connect with my customer, right? So I needed to take a step back. Before I even contacted them, I needed to do some research on them. I needed to know what their product lines were about. I needed to know just who they were as people, what their backgrounds were. I needed to have some feedback for them. So it wasn't necessarily just a cold call. It was me as, yes, a company representative, but also at the same time as a consumer, calling and talking about their product line. Any CEO you meet, any president of their company is going to be passionate about what their products are, right? They're going to be passionate about the products that they sell. So it was important for me to understand exactly what they're selling, provide them with some feedback, provide them maybe even with some negative feedback, just let them know how I felt, but let them know that I spoke the same language that they did.
And that of course requires a person to have really strong, not only communication skills, but also, I think it's something, a term that we read a lot about now, is the emotional intelligence and the ability to read your environment and read other people. But you have to first of all get these people on the phone, or find those, or create a message, a pathway to have those people get you on the phone and call you. What was the strategy that worked for you in growing revenues as quickly as you did?
Yeah, well, I can say nobody was calling me. It was me calling all of them, that's for sure. But
so that makes you a friend of rejection. You got to be able. Tell us about.
It's like I said, I'll take 99 no's to get 1 yes. Yeah, it's just part of the pathway. But part of it is also putting together, being organized, and being prepared. Right. So before I contact a client, I first of all want to document everything that I can about that client or potential client. I want to write their name down. I want to research what positions they're in, research a lot about their company, how they started, look at consumer feedback, look at consumer reviews, anything that I can find that helps me connect when I pick up that phone and I finally do get through. Anything that I can use to just connect with the owner or the buyer, whoever it might be. So that way they know that I'm not just a salesman, that I'm actually someone that is passionate about the same things that they are.
So I know that you're in the manufacturing business, which leads me to conclude that you have people in your employ from every level, every sector. Could you tell us about an entry-level position, versus a high level position, and what the skill sets people should bring to the table, regardless of where they're coming in?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the great things about being in manufacturing is you can be at any skill set and there could be a job for you, right? So if you're somebody that drives a forklift, that's a great position. You can be a forklift driver in the warehouse, loading and unloading. You can be working on a production line. And if you're great at setting up equipment, setting up pieces of equipment where you can repair them, break them down, fix the problem, solve the problems, you can have a position as like a maintenance mechanic or a repairman in a foreman shop. So there's definitely a lot that you can do. And then you can work yourself up too. It doesn't necessarily mean that just because if you're working on a line, you're stuck on a production line. You can work yourself up to being a line leader. You can work yourself up to being a supervisor. And the list just grows on. And if you do have a science background, that's great too, because you can work in areas such as quality control, quality assurance, and you can utilize your background for the position. So it's a nice thing in manufacturing is that you can be from all different backgrounds and there's still work for you to do.
So when you take somebody in an entry-level position and you're assessing which people you grow, what are the skills that you look for in identifying the candidate that you're going to give an opportunity to or incentivize to pursue higher levels of responsibility?
Yeah, so one, we definitely want to look at your strengths. If you are somebody that has had a background of working in production or working with pieces of equipment, setting up, running them, we definitely want to look at that. That's an area that you should be focused on, that you can sell yourself to the employer, because those are all things where it can come in very useful. And it's not just useful in the sense that it can help production, it can help the assembly lines. It's something that can help you grow, because us as a company, there's other people that also have experience. There's coaches and supervisors and managers, and they can help you grow as well. So those are areas we look at. And we want to also look at, when you come in for an interview, how's your communication? Can you communicate? How's your writing? How's your reading? And like we're going back to saying before, like critical thinking, if something was to happen in this environment, what would you do?
So Satish, as a big company, you've got a role in your community as well. Could you tell me a little bit about how that role has changed as you went from a small family operated business to one that provides a livelihood for more than 100 people?
Yeah. And I think there's two answers to that. So one, it's going to be for the community and for the company, and the other one will be me as a person personally. Right. So as the company, we're able to go out and, talk to recruiters, talk to temporary agencies, and let them know the positions that we have open. And by doing so, we're reaching out to the local community and saying, hey, if you're looking for a job, we have openings for you. Come by, apply, give us your resume, talk about your past, your experience. Let's see what you have and see how you can contribute. So we definitely want to help in that way, where it's creating jobs for the local community. And when you're doing so, you're providing a stream of income along with benefits, medical benefits, health benefits for that person and their family. So the work pays off, and it's worth it to take a company and be able to do that as a person.
Well, you also have to make sure that you can pay all of those people. And I got to imagine a company like yours that's growing that fast is going to need a lot of financial heft. How do you develop relationships with strategic partners, if you need to, that provides capital for you to keep growing? What's the strategy for that?
Yeah, so it's really important to find a bank that wants to work with you, right? And that's what it was for us. It's finding a bank that you can be with for a long time. So like I was saying before, don't just think about where you are right now. Think about 5 years from now, 10 years, 5 steps ahead. And you want to be thinking about, when you're with a bank, are you working well with that bank? Is your representative, do they trust you? Are they listening to your story and being part of your vision? Because once you start to grow and you start to show them that it's not just a vision, it's reality, then they're going to be more by your side. They'll stand with you and they'll help you additional, like we were talking about, financing. And that's exactly how you're going to get there. You want to build that relationship, and you want to show that you walk the walk of what you've been trying to prove.
How about some of the other community relationships? Does your company active in any type of social issues? We've got a lot of social justice challenges in America today. And I'm always curious when I have the opportunity to speak with a business leader that has such a big role in keeping our communities going. Do you have any role in responding to social justice issues, such as the one that I'm passionate about, and that's helping formerly incarcerated people transition into society successfully?
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually a great example. We've worked with formerly incarcerated people where it's, we're not here to judge you based on your past. We're here to judge you on what your skill sets are. What did you develop while you were gone? Or what have you done in the past that would bring some contribution to the company, right? Because we want to see you grow as an individual, and we also want to see you come in and being able to help the company perform better, help other employees around you perform better. So those are all selling points that you can bring to the table. And it's not necessarily just about somebody's past, right? And that's why, we've worked with temporary agencies. We've worked with other groups that have access to people that, might be formerly incarcerated and looking for jobs. And it's great to connect with them.
So I'm curious on a personal level how life has changed for you, because you look really young to me. And you said that you'd gotten out of college and started at a very high level in a small company, but you didn't keep that company small. You grew that company. Could you tell us, how did your life change as an individual by staying focused and staying disciplined? I mean, what changed it? What are you able to do today that you weren't able to do when you first started?
Well, one of the things that I could do is I could sit on this podcast with you right now and talk about what I've done, right? I mean, I couldn't have done that in the past, but it's utilizing just going from a very small point to the place that I've reached today and going back and basically revisiting and looking at it. And what that does, and when you realize that you kind of have a formula for success and things that have worked for you, it brings you confidence, right? You become a confident person. And when you become a confident person, you can talk to business leaders like yourself and say, hey, Michael, this is what I've done in my past, and this is where I'm headed. And this is why, I'm still focused and why I'm still looking for change and why I want to continue to contribute. But the confidence is really something that's key, and it can't be faked. It's something that you have to work at. You have to really fine tune yourself and find that success level where you can bring it out naturally. And that's the biggest change that it's had in my life.
I want to talk about some of those successes of other things that you pursued outside of this business, that you pursued with confidence. But before we get there, there's another subject that I'm really spending a lot of time with right now, and it has to do with compliance. Could you tell us a little bit about the investment that your company has to make just to make sure that all the people that work in your group are following best practices? Who defines what best practices are? How do you make sure that you're in compliance with regulations and laws and avoiding potential problems that can disrupt operations for a big company?
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the nail, right? It's looking at all the people that are around you and understanding that you're responsible for their entire well-being, right? If you're not running the company correctly, then that affects their families, it affects their income source, it affects their paycheck, and that's not something you want to do. So it's really important that you take a step back, and while you're spending a lot of time growing the company, you want to make sure you're growing the company correctly. So you're gonna have to hire consultants, you might have to hire lawyers, or you might just have to open the book yourself and just start reading it from page to page and checkboxing everything and making sure that you are doing exactly what the law says you should be doing, or whether it's the local authorities or whoever's enforcing the laws and rules and regulations within your industry, that you're doing what they would want you to be doing. And that's an investment. It takes time. It takes the right people. It takes money. It takes, making some mistakes and learning from those mistakes. But ultimately, you want to keep progressing on that level. It's something that should never be overlooked, because it's very easy to be doing something wrong and thinking that you were doing it okay, or just sweeping it under the rug, and then for that to later come back and bite you in the rear.
And right now, it's already 7:20 here in California, which means it's a pretty long day for you, like it's been a long day for me. And that's one of the questions that I have for you. A lot of people live with this conception that if you own a company or if you build a business, you don't have to work as hard, but you're working every time I reach out to you, you're busy, you're always working. Yeah. What is a typical work week for you? How many hours do you apply to your job?
You work until the job's done. and that's never. So you're always working, right? So the workload is always there, but you have to remember, having a plate stacked from the floor to the ceiling is a good thing, right? It could be the other way around where you don't have any work, and that's not good. You want to have the workload. And all you really want to do is, when I went to Rutgers, we had this thing called the RU chop, right? It was the way they played football. It wasn't looking at the whole game as a whole. It was looking at one pass at a time, and they called it the chop. We're only focused on that one pass. We're only focused on that one play. And that's exactly how I do it. I'm always focused on the one task that I want to complete right now. I know I have the pile to work on. I'll get there. But let me make sure I do a good job on this first one before I go to the next one.
And what did you call that? What was that acronym called? The CHOP?
Oh, it's called the RU CHOP, the Rutgers University CHOP. Yeah.
And that's focusing on the task at hand and giving 100% commitment to that task at hand. Is that right?
Absolutely.
I'm going to remember the Rutgers University CHOP, because that's a great concept. But let's talk, let's kind of, as we're coming to the end of our episode today, I'd like to ask you just a couple of questions. If there's been things outside of your manufacturing company, which you've really built into a phenomenal workforce out here in Southern California, have there been other investments or other opportunities that have attracted you? Because you're still a young man, and I'm just curious if you've ventured into real estate or the stock market or cryptocurrency or anything else that's going on. And if so, could you tell us a little bit about those pursuits?
Yeah, and I've been fortunate where I've been able to take one pursuit of success in the company and diversify that into other things that can bring me success later down the line, right? So just like you said, working on real estate, working on a home. So I was able to buy a home at a fairly young age. And that put me right on the map, where I knew that a home can build equity. It can not just be a place to live, but every single payment I made on the house was adding to my net worth, right? So eventually over time, the home would pay off and I would have a great investment that's just growing. And same thing in the stock market. I've been able to spend a lot of time reading books about stocks and trading stocks and learning how to really invest and grow a position within the stock market so you can start growing your own net worth. And that's ultimately what we're after here. We want to not just take success in one aspect, we want to take it and multiply it and diversify it to others. So that way I can start doing things personally where I know, not just right now, but 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years from now, that it'll really grow into something that also becomes successful.
Well, Satish, I really want to thank you for spending so much time after working a long day in your company. You've been so generous in giving us your time to give us more information. And I'm going to recap what I would have learned from you if I were still locked inside of a prison. But before I give that recap, I'd like to ask you if you have any, well, you know what, maybe I'll give the recap first, and that way you can correct me and tell me what I've missed. Okay, so the people that go through our course, they're in jails and prisons across America. And I would say the only reason that I have any credibility with them is because I started my journey inside of a solitary cell of a high security penitentiary. And I was there for 9,500 days. But while I was there, I really listened to people like you. And that's why, first of all, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time. But I want to tell you what I would have learned from this lesson and how it coincides with the course that people are going through. One of the first modules in our course is we talk about the importance of defining success. And I heard Satish talk about defining success at a very young age. He grew up in Southern California. There was some racism in his community, but he didn't let that block him. He knew he wanted to develop a career in science, started studying chemistry. His counselor guided him, and he just took those incremental steps, which is the second module, incremental steps. That's what we talk about, is defining clear goals. We heard that in Satesh's story, and that's why it's part of our course. It's leaders like him that validate this concept. And then the next concept is you can just hear all the way through the 100% commitment to success that he made, whether it was in high school, whether it was in college. Remember what he said? Yeah, it was a long ways. I was a long ways from home. It was a 6-year program, but every step got me closer. And so it was that commitment that helped him. Next, he had to have an aspiration. He had to see himself as being exactly what he has become, a successful professional scientist who's also a really successful businessman. Fifth, none of that would have happened for Satish if he didn't take action. Just like nothing is going to happen for anybody in prison unless they can reject the negativity and build that self-intrinsic motivation that I heard Satish talking about. Six, he's got to hold himself accountable. He doesn't expect anybody else to define success for him. He knew that he had to apply the Rutgers chop, and he focused on that task every single day. Seven, he had to stay aware of opportunities. He understood he had to identify a school, earn the grades to get into the school, complete the school, and then come back and apply everything that he has learned to building a great business. But he also said that he was willing to learn along the way and trial and error. I heard him say that several times. And this is what would have inspired me when I was in prison. Okay, if a successful guy like that is giving me the roadmap, I better follow that roadmap unless I want to be like everybody else in prison, complaining about there's nothing to do. I didn't hear Satish talking about that. I heard him saying, I'll do whatever it takes, bring the people in and grow our business. Number 8, you got to be authentic. And if there's nothing else you learn from Satish, it's that he is 100% authentic. He said that you can't fake the confidence. Either you did it or you didn't. And here's a man who did it. Number 9, you got to celebrate those little achievements, understanding chemistry, getting into high school, getting through college, building his business. All of those were incremental steps. And then 10, he talks about sowing seeds of appreciation. Instead of just focusing on himself, he said he wanted to make sure that his teammates and his employees always had a job. They was always building. That's what is the nexus of this entire course. It's nothing that I created. I'd love to say I created that. But the reality is I learned from leaders like Satish, and I hope that you will learn from leaders like Satish as well, because that's the pathway to changing your life. And I will only say that because it's what changed my life. I would never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. And all I did while I was in prison is learn from leaders like Satish. And I just really want to thank you for being a part of our community. And I'd like to also ask you, Satish, what did I miss in this interview? What did I miss that you would like to communicate with people who are living in the midst of state prisons and federal prisons and jails? They've got an opportunity to listen to a leader. And if I miss something, I'd sure like you to correct me and help them get it.
You captured everything I said. You hit it right on the nail. But maybe one thing that I should say that I didn't say to you is always strive to evolve. Granted, you might reach to this level that was your goal. That's what you plan to hit. But start thinking about the next level, right? Start thinking about what you need to do next to get to your next step, to get to your next era, and start planning that. Don't be afraid of challenges. Everything in life is going to be a challenge. If it wasn't, then everyone would have it, right? So continue to evolve and continue to think, continue to challenge yourself, get better.
And my challenge always is to find true leaders that I can bring into jails and prisons. We might not be able to penetrate those gates, but we can do so through these video courses and the lessons. And Satish has agreed not only to give us his time, but he's also donating his time to help me develop a written lesson that we can use to help more people in prison really grasp these fundamentals of developing strong critical thinking skills, good writing skills, good speaking skills, and a really insane work ethic, which is one thing I admire about Satish. So thank you so much for being a part of our community. We look forward.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I do hope that you will subscribe to the channel, like us on Facebook. But if you're inside of a jail or a prison, I hope that you will take these lessons that Satish so generously gave to us and apply them to your life so we can all be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.